so I'm back, and today we're going to take a look at a different type of lens. As this video is filmed with the 32 to 70 Nikkor, we're going to do another thing now. I thought I needed something, since this camera I'm using, the D7200, is an APS-C body with a 1.5x crop factor. It was a little bit, I wanted something that really could go into the wide angle spectrum, because even though the 32 to 70 on paper is a wide angle lens, on a APS-C body it will become more of a normal to telefocus. So what I did was that I went on eBay, of course, and I started to look around at something that was, a little bit more extreme wide angle for a full frame perspective, because I like to buy, old 35mm lenses. So what I found was actually this lens. It's a 19 to 35mm with a f3.5 to 4.5 aperture, and I got it actually from Israel, of all places, so this has traveled quite a bit. And I actually had to pay import taxes on it as well, so that's a tip for you. If you're anywhere in the European Union, try to find sellers on eBay within the European Union, and you don't have to pay that much import tax on it. But anyway, it might not come as a surprise to you. This lens is, yes, it's another one with the red 1 on it. It's another Vivitar Series 1. But fret not, this is a little bit of an odd thing, because this is actually not a complete manual lens. This is actually an autofocus. So before we start to rant about this, I've actually seen this particular thing. When I've Googled about this lens to get some research about it, it turns out that Vivitar was not the only brand that actually sold this lens. This lens was probably made a little bit, generic. So you have these particular lenses, which it says, Cosina on it, ProMaster, Soligor, and probably more, but this is the Vivitar version. And apparently this has begun to become a little bit of a cult following lens. But anyway, here you can see the Vivitar Series 1 lens cap. Yeah. And if you hear this in the background, the little bit of the noise, it's actually that the lens that I'm using on the camera, and you might have noticed if you look at my videos before that I don't have the microphone on the table anymore. That's because it's now mounted atop the camera, so I'm doing this review a bit as a test to see if the audio quality becomes a little bit better if the microphone is a little bit further away and a little bit higher up. Since the Opteka 200 series microphone that I'm using is a stereo condenser mic, I thought I might give it a try to use it as intended atop the camera. And I might get some other type of mic stand so I can have the microphone a bit off the camera, because I'm noticing I pick up the focusing sound of the camera, because the 35 to 70 Nikkor that is on the camera is like this one. It's a autofocus lens that uses the internal focusing motor of the D7200. That being said, let's go into the review of this lens here. As it says, it's a 19 to 35, and that's for 35mm film cameras. It has a aperture range, depending on zoom, between 3.5 to 4.5. Yeah, a little bit of a note, because I'm using the D7200, this lens has the electronics in it, so that I can use the camera to change the aperture on the fly. So you have the normal, AIS style aperture control. You can see through here, it's not that big. You have to have it on 22 though in order to use the on-camera features. But anyway, It has a it has a angle of view of about 97 to 63 degrees. At 19mm zoom, it's 97 degrees. And now the cat comes and chows down again, so you might hear that in the background. And if you have it to 35, it apparently has a 63-degree angle of view. Yeah. As we stated before, the aperture goes from 3.5 to 22 when you're in 19mm zoom range. The lens itself contains 13 glass elements in 11 groupings. It has a fairly substantial filter size of 77 millimeters, excuse me. And as you can see, I don't have the cover on the back or the front of the lens, but this is plastic construction, so it's a little bit, I guess you can call it was a little bit of a cheaper quality lens. And if I held this up to the camera, you might be able to hear it. It has a bit of a rattle to it. But all in all, it's a bargain lens. This has a little bit of a cult following, I know, after reading some forums about this lens. So it has a bit of a following, and it's a good lens because, as I've noticed when I've done some test photographies with it, it has very warm colors. It's good for warm colors. That's the color tone of this lens, but it's a bit soft, wide open, so it's at 3.5, the most wide open part of the aperture, it gets a bit soft, very soft actually, so that's a bit to be considered when going for this. But as I've been saying before, this lens was made for a bunch of different brands, so you can get it from different manufacturers, you know, Cosina, ProMaster, Soligor, and so on. So you can get it in the different varieties of both bayonet fittings for different camera brands, but also from different lens brands as well, optics brands, whatever you want to call it. But for what it is, I would say this lens is a good lens for someone who is just getting into photography and wants something that is fairly modern, should I say. As you can see back here, it uses a camera focusing motor. It doesn't have an internal focusing motor. It doesn't have vibration reduction. It doesn't have any of those gizmos in it. But anyway, photography has existed for hundreds of years now, over 100 years I should say, and I think if you could get by without vibration reduction and so on before, I think you could probably still get by without vibration reduction and so on, because this works for me at least. I mean, use a tripod if you have to. And it's a good lens. I would really recommend it for the beginner to, you know, intermediate, who needs something that would go between wide angle to normal. So yes, it's a good lens for what it is. You can get it in a bunch of different brands. The negatives is some people, depending on what you're aiming for, it's a bit the warm color tone of it. It's a bit soft at some aperture settings, the plastic construction, a little bit of rattling. That might just be my particular example of this, but I would recommend it. It's a good lens. It's not the all bells and whistles, top of the line model, but I would really recommend it. It's a good lens for what it is, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.